Welcome, Ms. Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Gatto.
We believe you're presenting Assembly Bill 2339, and the floor is yours.
Yes, I am.
Thank
First,
you.
I would like to thank the chair for working with us to find an agreeable solution to the concerns raised by the stakeholders. I want to accept the following amendments provided by the committee. First, on page 7, that publicly owned utilities may calculate non-coincident peak demand in a way consistent with the CPUC ruling for investor-owned utilities. Second,
So could you just so, because I think there's a lot of people both in the audience and on the dais trying to follow along. You just mentioned taking amendment on page 7 of the committee analysis. Is this amendment 4 or 5?
Okay.
And which component of amendment 4 is it?
We're passing out the amendments.
Okay. You can continue, and then we'll come back to that.
Okay, so I'll, and then I would like to accept also the second amendment, so that information will be passed out, and that's on page 8. As for the first amendment on page 5 regarding which POUs would have to use this calculation, I would like to offer that the bill is limited to POUs over 25,000 customer accounts. IOUs under 100,000 accounts represent approximately 1% of the IOU market. Under my proposal, those POUs under 25,000 would be 5% of the total POU market. In AB 327, only a small percentage of IOUs are excluded from the NEM cap calculation. Similarly, there are legitimate policy reasons to exclude small POUs. AB 2339 seeks to standardize the methodology for calculating the net energy metering caps for all electric utilities in California. Net energy metering is a billing service that provides credit to electric customers for utilizing renewable solar energy. This creates an incentive for customers to go solar and encourages private investment in renewable energy sources. The method POUs use significantly limits the number of customers who can access NEM compared to the number of IOUs. This is unfair to customers in POU service areas. As POUs begin to hit their NEM caps using this different methodology, they would make it extremely unattractive for electric customers to go solar and utilize clean energy. Consequently, this significantly reduces local and private investment in renewable energy sources and associated job growth. As California continues to be a world leader on reducing climate change and moves to adopt new policies that reduce greenhouse gases and promote clean energy, it is important that a statewide framework is set up for electric utilities that encourages the growth of renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to your first witness in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Bernadette Del Chiaro. I'm the Executive Director of the California Solar Energy Industries Association. We represent over 350 solar companies as well as organizations focused on job training and workforce development, as well as obviously the job of making and installing solar energy systems throughout the state of California. This bill is actually a fairly simple bill. The state of California has long established its support of rooftop solar technologies and its support of net metering. We have already long established that 5% is the cap on the current net metering program. What this bill does is it creates a level playing field in the definition of that cap. How you define that cap, as anybody knows, simple mathematics and percentages makes a big difference in the actual numbers of people that can go solar here in the state of California. What we're trying to do with this bill is create that level playing field and give consumers within publicly owned utilities the same access and ability to go solar as those in investor-owned utilities. Now, that said, while it's very simple, I do want to make the point that the publicly owned utilities in the state of California play a very, very important role in our energy services and in our meeting our environmental goals. If you look at the POUs added together, the population service more people than about 20 states in the country. It's a big number of people that are involved and included in this program. Secondly, about 50% of California's publicly owned utilities still get electricity from coal. I think because a lot of times people think that coal has sort of been eliminated from the state of California, but in fact our POUs still rely heavily on coal. And in fact, a third of our POUs get as much or more of their electricity from coal than they get from renewables. So there's no need right now. This is not the time to be slowing down our investments in renewable energy in publicly owned utility districts. Second, net metering, as you've heard time and again, is a critical foundational policy for the California solar market. The 75,000 jobs that we employ here in the state are largely based on a net metering market. If you take net metering away, you will see job loss and no more job growth in California. And as some of our other witnesses will testify, in the places that need it most. And this is going to hurt farmers as well as businesses, school districts, and homeowners and renters. So in closing, I just want to emphasize that, as we all know, the people of California are strongly in support of solar energy. They are actually 80%.
Excuse me 1 second. Could we have some quiet in the audience, please? We've got somebody testifying. We'd like to hear her testimony. Thank you. Please continue.
Polls also show that 80% of Californians disagree with utilities' attempts right now to do away with net metering. So on behalf of our 350 member companies and businesses throughout the state of California, as well as the 2 million plus individuals who will be benefited by this bill, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Next witness.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. Eddie On, Executive Director of Brightline Defense Project. We are a public policy organization dedicated to empowering communities and sustainable environments, particularly on environmental justice issues. And we strongly believe in the value of AB 2339 because of 2 points. First of all, solar is better for our communities that we represent, that in the sense that it means less environmental pollution on a very basic level. You've heard an articulation from CalC already that over 50% of the POUs use coal as their source of generation, and to focus on Turlock, not to pick on Turlock, but 13% of their own generation comes from coal itself. And if you look across the board at the POU chart, unfortunately it lags behind the 33% renewable target. Now we understand that that's a result of contracts that some of the POUs have locked themselves into, and it's of no fault of their own. Yet we still believe an aggressive push for solar is important to make sure that we can incentivize folks to step toward cleaner sources of energy generation. And we also believe that it should be targeted toward local low-income communities. We've seen landmark pieces of legislation, such as AB 693 from Assemblymember Eggman, that shows as to how you can target solar for our communities and make sure that those jobs can be potentially toward those communities, which leads to the second point, which is that workforce development is a major concern and should be continued with aggressive push in the solar industry. We've seen programs such as Grilled Alternatives, which has trained up 1,700 people in the Inland Empire alone, ready, expectant for new jobs to come. And that is in partnership oftentimes with other great community-based organizations such as Rising Sun Energy Center, which has often testified several times before this committee. So with that all in mind, given the need for good-paying jobs in solar, as well as a need for clean energy generation, we strongly urge your support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Todd Filburn from Curios Energy, a small community-based solar company in Manteca. We serve the greater Modesto, up until recently, Turlock and Stockton area, primarily PG&E and MID territories now. We're a local company. We're dependent on a strong solar policy coming out of Sacramento, as we've seen with TID. Without that policy, POUs are allowed to enact new NEM regulations that effectively kill solar. Their solar's off 85% from NEM 1.0. We no longer operate in the TID territory because we cannot give the savings and the freedom of choice to their customers to go solar, except for the extremely rich who do it for non-financial reasons. MID there in Modesto is looking to enact an 8,000% reduction in NEM savings to their customers, which effectively is no NEM at all. It would take away our ability to operate in the greater Modesto area. These mean revenue for our company and, unfortunately, jobs. We would be laying off a lion's share of our employees and effectively streamlining our operation by 2/3. So the other interesting thing about those policies is it really puts ag at a disadvantage. TID's policy really takes farmers completely off the table because of their intermittent use throughout the year. And so they are at a competitive disadvantage for just by simply being in a POU territory versus an IOU. and we would love to see that amended through this bill. So I am asking you to vote in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to public comment and support.
Margaret Gladstein on behalf of Solar City and the California Retailers Association, strong support.
Thank you.
Susan Glick with Sunrun, strong support.
Jamie Price, TechNet, in support.
Aaron Moreno on behalf of the California Growers Association, in support.
Sylvia Solis Shaw on behalf of Advanced Energy Economy, in support.
Ana Ferreira on behalf of schools statewide. Schools are doing a lot more solar these days, and they're saving taxpayer dollars by doing that. And so we want as many options to do solar as possible. Thank you.
Eddie Moreno on behalf of Sierra Club California and Environment California, in support.
Okay, let's go to witnesses in opposition. Please come forward.
Mr. Gata?
Yeah.
I'd just say something real quick because I'll have to be gone
Sure.
the rest of the debate. I really feel like this is an important bill for us to continue to make our energy mix reflect our values. I am very concerned about the continuance of coal contracts and do want to see other alternatives, but it's a little personal for me. I'll let folks know why. I mean, some of these contracts are still with coal-fired power plants that are within the drift just outside of the Navajo reservation. So literally my wife's family breathes the crappy air and faces the health consequences if we do not do more switch to alternatives within the POUs.
Thank you. Okay, we will go to witnesses in opposition.
Mr. Chair and members, Greg Cook, representing the Northern California Power Agency. We're a joint powers authority consisted of 15 public power entities in Northern California. We're opposed to the bill in its present form. We have offered amendments to the author that would either remove our opposition or, for many of our members, result in their support of the legislation. These amendments have not been accepted by the author. I have with me today Deborah Lloyd, who is with the City of Palo Alto Public Electric Utility, and she's going to share the actual impact of implementing the legislation as it is proposed to be amended here in committee. And she'll share with what the impact is not only on the utility but on customers as well.
Got this one. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. I am Deborah Lloyd with City of Palo Alto, and I'm here today to explain Palo Alto's position on AB 2339. Palo Alto wants to move forward in support of local solar in a positive way, but we have concerns with the cost shift potential and ratepayer impact of the bill in its current form. But I would like to assure you of Palo Alto's commitment to renewable resources. The City of Palo Alto fully supports the state's environmental policy goals and has adopted its own climate action goals, including a carbon-neutral electric utility. In place since 2013, by next year we anticipate to be fully resourced with carbon-free resources, of which over 50% will be eligible renewable resources under the RPS program. We have set aggressive renewable and greenhouse gas reduction goals that include an ambitious local solar program. Our Utilities Advisory Commission, Finance Committee and full Council have performed extensive studies and review of this local solar program and its components in open and public forum. That being said, we have specific concerns with this bill that can be summarized in 5 brief points. First, cost shifting. Current law prevents the utility from designing a specific rate for net energy metering, NEM customers, to ensure they pay their fair share of the cost to serve them. The retail rate level of compensation allows the NEM customer to avoid certain utility costs. As a result, the current structure creates a cost shift from the NEM participants to the non-participating customers. That is to say, non-participating customers, including renters, apartment dwellers, low and fixed income customers, are subsidizing the installation of PV systems for the benefit of larger energy-using homeowners. The level of cost shift will differ between utilities depending on their customer use patterns and avoided costs, But in Palo Alto, we have preliminary or current estimate of around $105,000 per year in cost shift to non-participating residential customers for every megawatt of installed residential PV capacity. And let me clarify, this is $105,000 of residual costs shifted to non-participants after we account for the value of the solar generation from our NEM customers. And we do value local solar in Palo Alto. This cost shift will only be worsened if AB 2339 increases the cap. Secondly, the bill may conflict with elements of the California Constitution. Specifically, 2010's Proposition 26 requires certain local government charges, including electric rates, be limited to the amount required to provide service, absent voter approval. AB 2339's expansion of the current NEM restriction on rate design would require non-participating customers to pay more than their share for the services and products that the municipally owned utility provides to the NEM participants. Local governments should not be put in a position where they risk violating the California Constitution. Third, we expect to reach our NEM cap in just a few months. To further our commitment to local solar generation and achieve our own aggressive goals for local solar installations, we began planning for a successor NEM program in 2015. The design parameters for which are to continue to grow local solar in our city by fairly compensating solar customers for their generation while avoiding cost shifting to non-participants. We hope to have the proposal released for public review in the next couple of weeks. Just as with our other programs, the NEM Successor Program will go through rigorous review by our council and community members. We would also like to move forward with our community solar and solar donation programs, especially as they will be more inclusive than rooftop solar in the number of our customers who could participate. Our interpretation is that AB 2339 could jeopardize the immediate implementation of our successor program, because if it goes into law in January 2017, we will have to put a hold on our current efforts. Fourth, I'd note that AB 2339 also creates administrative burdens and costs, as we will need to determine the sum of all individual customer peak demands, a calculation that is complicated, expensive, and subjective. Lastly, the proponents argue that this bill will promote uniformity. However, while investor-owned utilities have been calculating their NEM cap using the non-coincident peak, they can stop doing so next year pursuant to 2013's AB 327. In closing, Palo Alto supports the NCPA proposed amendments that would allow the development of successor programs at the local utility level, expanding the NEM program in a fair and sustainable manner. Thank you for the opportunity to share Palo Alto's concerns, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to respond to some of the supporters' comments that they made in their testimony. We heard from the author that they are accepting an amendment for consistent rules, and I would like to remind the committee that legislation that this committee and the legislature adopted 2 years ago, AB 327, has been implemented by the PUC, and as a result of that, the consistent versus non-consistent measurement has been eliminated. Yet this bill says, well, we're going to have, especially for the POUs, we're going to have the non-consistent measurement in place. That's not level. Number two, there's a concern by a couple of your supporters who've indicated that there's a disadvantage to being in POU territory. I don't believe that, because you heard the program that Palo Alto is planning. If there's a disadvantage to the solar industry practicing their business in POU territories, because public electric utilities have a tremendously lower electric rate than do the investor-owned utilities, so it may not be quite as attractive, but that's a consumer decision. The utility, it has been said that we are trying to do away with net metering. Nothing could be further from the truth. Current law requires us to have 5% net metering forever. It doesn't say it's going to stop because this bill passes. We haven't proposed an amendment that would say the net metering would go away. We're saying that we want to continue with the program, but we don't want these kind of costly conditions put on us. Finally, the discussion regarding coal. I would urge the author and her supporters to take a look at the California Energy Commission's website regarding the status of coal procurement by publicly owned electric utilities in California, and you'll find that those contracts are being eliminated as soon as last year, for example, going through 2018. So I urge the committee to take a careful look at these last-minute amendments. We've tried very hard to work with the author. We hope to work with the author going forward. But this bill in this form is not a good bill, and we strongly urge your no vote. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to public comment in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Gil Topidi, the Director for Energy for the California Municipal Utilities Association in opposition to 2339. I am the representative who represents 40 of the state's publicly owned utility, many of whom are also included in the NCPA program agency as well. So I wanted to articulate 4 points briefly. In regards to the representation by the author on why the bill is needed, you had several vendors of solar from the solar industry kind of with their pockets turned inside out, that if it is not for the existing NEM program, that somehow their ability to market and sell to our consumers gets compromised. Now, AB 327, if we're going to talk about being fair, AB 327 that was passed out of this legislature just a few years ago had some caveats when it codified a CPUC process that allowed for the new calculation. Yes, it's still 5% of peak aggregate demand, but it's based off of a definition of how you get there. But what the CPUC's decision process also did, it said, let's develop a successor program, which they adopted in January on a 3-2 vote. That successor program kicks in for the IOUs by 2017, July 21st, 2017. If they haven't already reached their existing cap calculation, then something brand new kicks on that continues going forward. All we're asking for at this point is some fairness at that threshold. If it's good for the IOUs who have between 4 million and 5 customers, why on earth is not a similar successor program opportunity provided to the POU community with customers less than 600,000? Now, you had one representative say that in the Central Valley, business is evaporating, at least by 85%. I'm going to bring to the legislature's attention that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, who has had an exemption from the existing state program, they have their own program, unique to them, developed by them, with no cost shift. It is an NEM program that has achieved 160 megawatts of NEM power. I entertain the thought of bringing these actors back up and ask them, do they play in LA? Because LA does not provide retail rates to their customer. LA does not attempt to zero out the customer's usage by the end of the year. They help reduce the customer's usage, but it's a different program adopted by LA, a local POU. All we are asking, members, is that the POU community reach the existing cap. And then from there, who knows what we make? Because we are a public process. We have elected officials. All the people gathered around the table in support of the bill can show up into our community at IID and advocate for the best. So for us, members of the committee, we're just asking, if this is about fairness, then we are far short of being fair in the proposal before us today. Thank you.
Thank you. This is public comment in opposition.
Mr. Chairman and members, Delaney Hunter, on behalf of the Sacramento Municipal Utility District and the Southern California Public Power Authority, we remain opposed to the bill. We do believe that this is inconsistent treatment across the utilities. In some cases, one size doesn't fit all, and the way the recalculation is contemplated is damaging to our customers and to your constituents, and we ask for a no vote.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Justin Fanza on behalf of the Coalition of California Utility Employees, California State Association of Electrical Workers, and Local 18, Brian DRC, who could not be here today and who actually hasn't had a chance to review the proposed amendments and some possible amendments that the author is considering right now. Mr. Topidi brought up what is of major concern, which is how do we ensure that a locally controlled elected board representing constituents, ratepayers, who may or may not be benefiting from net metering are not harmed by this. The sponsors of the bill spoke a lot about job production. We are happy to work with the solar industry to come up with good jobs that guarantee that ratepayers and those that are benefiting from rooftop solar are having properly installed by highly skilled workers on top of their roof, as well as looking at the complex nature of what we've been doing in this committee for many, many years, which is trying to increase renewable energy throughout California. That is not limited to solar. There are lots of other folks out here who are looking at geothermal, wind power, many other things that are out there that have not received all of the benefits that the solar industry has received from this legislature and the federal government over the last many years. We are working with your staff. I appreciate all the work that you, Mr. Chair, your staff, the author's office have put in with us the last couple of days to try to come to a conclusion. If we could have a little more time to review these amendments, we'd appreciate that. If the author wishes to pursue a vote today, we would encourage a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment in opposition. Please just, if you could, keep your comments brief. This is public comment. The testimony's already happened. Thank you.
Certainly. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Casey Hashimoto, and I'm the General Manager of Turlock Irrigation District. May I get a quick, I wanted to make sure that the page 8 amendment was in fact accepted. It went rather quickly, so.
You know, that's a question for the author.
Page 8.
Page 8, there's a number of amendments. There's 6, I'm sorry, there's the one at the top of page 8.
That one, yes.
And I don't believe that was accepted, but Ms. Irwin can tell us if that's the case.
Did you get the...
This came from the outside. Thank you very much. TID was officially opposed to the bill. However, with the author accepting the committee amendment, we would like to formally remove our opposition. We'd like to thank the author for accepting the grandfathering amendment, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Kira Ross on behalf of the cities of Pasadena, Burbank, and Glendale all remain strongly opposed.
And
good afternoon, Matt Klopfenstein on behalf of Pacificor. We do not have a position on the bill. We just hope that there can be some clarity in the language and as well as the intent behind the bill, whether or not small investor-owned utilities will be included. And we've heard kind of mixed messages, so we just seek some clarity there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses or public comment in support or opposition? Seeing none, let's turn it over to members of the committee for questions, comments. Mr. Quirk.
This was a complicated bill to begin with, and I'm just trying to figure out. So I came here prepared to vote for it, but I'm now trying to figure out the effect of the changes in. So I think when we talk about it's the amendment you're not taking is on page 5. Is that correct? You're taking a different version of it.
The amendment I'm not taking is on, it's page 5.
Okay. And the net effect is on 12 utilities, those between those that have 25,000 up to Anaheim that has 70,000. Those are the only 12 that will be affected by not taking this amendment?
Well, no, it would be everything above 25,000 would not be excluded. Anything below would be excluded.
So I'll step in and translate. There are, you identified 12, but it's actually 10 because 2 of them are IOUs. That was a question from the gentleman from Pacificor. And you're talking about everything above 25,000. That would be 10 POUs. So yeah.
So there's 10 POUs that would be affected in the 25 to 70,000. And so even if they had a NEM 2.0, they would have to, they wouldn't be grandfathered in. Is that the case? Or I'm trying to, perhaps the chair, do you understand the difference here?
We've been talking about this bill for a long time this week, and there's been a lot of last-minute proposals, and we are working very hard to try to understand them ourselves. One of the proposals, and it's important to distinguish between the part that governs numbers and the part that governs a successor tariff. The current bill, given the amendments that the author has taken, would have the numbers component but not the successor tariff component.
Maybe I can explain.
Sure.
So there's basically what this bill originally would do is apply the definition of the net metering cap, the same definition that applies to the investor-owned utilities, to all of the POUs, all 40 plus of them. The amendment that the author has offered to take is not to set the bar at 100,000, but instead at 25,000, which is about the median size of a POU. here in the state of California. It allows 20 or so POUs that are smaller than 25 to not have to be obligated. They can voluntarily adopt the state definition, the NEM cap, but they would not be obligated to. Those that are bigger than 25,000 would be obligated to adopt a definition, except if a POU already has a successor tariff in place, which is essentially Turlock and Lompoc. Turlock would have an exemption out because they already have a tariff in place, and Lompoc would have already been captured as smaller than 25,000 anyway, so it's sort of a double exemption for them.
All right, so what's the difference between the committee amendment and the amendment that you've taken? I'm trying to figure that out.
So the Turlock one, I believe the author has taken in full without any change. The committee suggested 100,000. What we're offering back is 25 as the threshold, as a legitimate threshold for a size utility that should be brought into this market. Into
Yes,
this
but
definition.
they also said it can go to 25 if there is not certainty provided.
And that.
So why are you concerned with these 10 not providing their own program? I mean, you're basically saying these 10 can't provide their own NEM 2.0 program.
No, I think what the bill.
Again,
so I think so I apologize for not clarifying that. So there's how you define the cap, and then what you do after you get beyond the cap. The successor tariff versus getting to the cap. What this bill is trying to do is be very simple and just saying the definition of the cap should be the same as for the IOUs.
But that would be 100,000. The IOUs didn't. For the IOUs, it's 100,000 and above. You want to extend it down to 25,000.
Right? Because if you,
which the committee allows with their amendment. If your amendment would say, if you don't have a NEM 2.0, then it goes down to 25,000. Well, let me make sure. Is that really what the amendment does?
We've discussed a number of amendments in the last several days. This is just one of them that is here. There were also amendments to discuss that had to do with even those smaller than 25,000 who had a higher percentage of their portfolio in coal. So I think that there is a path forward here, and I think that there's a way that we can make sure that we incentivize solar on these rooftops, also in cities and not just in IOU territory, and do it in a way that makes the most sense for the most ratepayers of the state.
I trust you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair.
Well, I'll make it real quick. This is what a lot of people criticize this body over. This is really ugly sausage making in front of us right now. Frankly, I'm very concerned about how loosey-goosey this is and how uncertain and how ambiguous all of this movement is. So I'm going to suggest this is not the time for us to move something forward that is this convoluted and uncertainty. And then I also just want to express I have not been convinced that the best outcome here is to leave it local. I mean, we have heard people say, Palo Alto and others, we have a local board. People are elected people. There's oversight. There's responsibility locally. So why aren't you lobbying and engaging in those few that have local boards? And my guess is you probably get the same kind of response like Palo Alto's giving. I'm just saying, for me right now, the sausage is too mixed up, and I'm more and more convinced that we should probably leave this local. Thank you.
So I'm going to get to Mr. Garcia and just clarify a few things. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you would like another week perhaps to lock down some of these issues. We will not be taking a vote today, and we're going to continue to work with the author to work through some of these issues. And we'll put this up for a vote only next week. Having done the hearing today, we'll be very clear on what amendments the author is taking, and then we can do this for a vote next week.
Yeah, we wanted to clarify the amendments, and we have talked to some of the opposition, and they have committed to us that they're going to work with us to make sure that we come to some sort of agreement next week.
Great. Mr. Garcia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sure. You good? No? Any other questions or comments from the panel? Okay, we have our commitment that we will continue to work with you and get this just right, and look forward to working with everybody who testified on this bill today. Thank you. Okay, last housekeeping stuff. I believe we're going to lift some calls. We'll start with 1574. Also, I did not announce the vote on 2453. 2453 has passed. Madam Secretary, let's lift the call on all the people, or for all of the measures where our members need to add on. Thank you.
AB 1574. Burke. Burke, aye. Eggman. Eggman not voting. Eduardo Garcia. Eduardo Garcia, aye. Roger Hernandez. Santiago. Santiago, aye. Ting. Williams. That vote is 10 ayes, 0 noes. AB 1923, Eggman. Eggman, aye. Roger Hernandez. Santiago. Santiago, aye. Ting. That vote is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That vote is 13 ayes, 0 noes.
That was.
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I thought we already announced it, but I'll announce it again. So 1574 has passed.
AB 2168, Burke. Burke, aye. Eggman. Eggman, aye. Roger Hernandez. Santiago. Santiago, aye. Ting. 13 ayes, 0 noes. The consent calendar, Burke. Burke, aye. Eggman. Eggman, aye. Roger Hernandez. Roger Hernandez, aye. Santiago. Santiago, aye. Ting. That vote is 14-0 on the consent calendar. And AB 2453, Eggman. Eggman, aye. Roger Hernandez.
Aye.
Roger Hernandez, aye. Santiago. Aye. Santiago, aye. Ting. That vote is 13-0. Roger Hernandez, aye. AB 1574. AB 1923, Roger Hernandez, aye. AB 2168, Roger Hernandez, aye.
So we're going to stick around for a couple more minutes. I think there's a member on the way up. They can just come to the dais and add on. All of their members are excused. Thank you very much.